All right. Yes, love Phantom Menace. Let's talk about Rebel Season 4, Ryan, and your thoughts on that. Now, I think it would have been Dan and I, or maybe me and Dan and Chris, or maybe Chris and I don't know, something. We did an episode about the finale of Rebel Season 4, or at least we talked about those episodes when they aired over the winter, I guess, right? Wasn't it?
It was like, I think it ended in like February or March.
Yeah, I guess it was that recent. For some reason, I was thinking it ended before Last Jedi came out, but it didn't. They just kind of took a break before Last Jedi.
Mid-season
split
or whatever.
And they came back. Yeah. Anyway, so my thoughts are out there. I'll talk more about it today. But like, what did you think about the end of Rebels?
So I guess first I should preface this in like what took me so long is just the fact that like I was crazy busy and my school year just ended, and as I was busy, like I was watching the episodes weekly, and then as things got busier, I started to miss some here and there, and they started to pile up, and then it became this like really just challenging like 12 episodes on our DVR. But Lindsay and I finally just sat down and knocked them all out yesterday. Well, we did like a few the weekend or 2 weekends before. We did about half of them, and then we did like the other half yesterday. So finally finished that. But that meant like I have been avoiding like episodes of my favorite podcasts because like there's so many like reactions episodes and stuff, so like I was just like always skipping those, and now I can actually finally go back and listen to them to see like how other people felt about them. But like I feel like my thoughts are coming from a very pure place where like I haven't really seen any or heard any reactions to it, except like I had a few texts with you, and I talked a little bit with Lindsay about it as well. So this may be like, my thoughts may be something that's like well treaded territory, but whatever. That's where I'm coming from here.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, I think you know what? Like, I think the reaction overall, at least from like the stuff that I heard and stuff, was more positive than you'd probably think. Not that you don't have like, you've put this in our show notes as good and bad. So you've got stuff you liked and stuff you didn't like as much, but like, yeah, some of the stuff that didn't work for probably either of us. It seemed like a lot of people were more into it than maybe we were. So I don't know. But yeah, let's just get into it and we'll go through it. So what did you think was like, let's talk about the positives.
Yeah.
What are you into there?
Yeah. Oh, and spoiler alert, obviously.
Well, yeah.
But it's also like 4 months later or whatever.
Well,
so.
Yeah, but you know what's weird about that? I was like, I was about to say like, well, if you haven't seen it at this point, you probably don't care anyway, right? But like you cared at least to a certain extent. You haven't seen it, so
I cared, and I literally just finished yesterday. So
yeah, so I guess that's not really great logic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Demonstrably false. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think Kevin still hasn't finished.
Yeah, he's not trying that hard though. I don't think he's gonna finish it probably ever, really. But we'll see.
He will.
Okay. All right.
But Kevin, you should not be listening at this point.
Turn it off, Kevin.
You just finish it.
Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. So good. We got animated Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And a cool organ theme music in the background every time he was on screen too.
Yeah. I thought like his he looked great, and I'm not sure who did his voice.
Lars Mikkelsen, I believe is his name, which is Mads Mikkelsen's. Is that his name? Mads Mikkelsen?
Yeah.
Of Rogue One.
Really?
Yeah, it's his brother.
What?
Yep.
Oh my god.
You gotta watch. You should be. See, here's part of the problem, Ryan. I've been trying to tell you all along. If you don't watch
Rebels
the
Recon.
Rebels Recon after
Uh-huh.
every episode, you're not getting the full Rebels experience.
That's totally
That's an
true.
essential part of watching Star Wars Rebels.
That's totally true. When the Blu-rays come out, I'll watch all those.
All right, there you go.
For sure. I love Rebels Recon.
Yeah, but like if you're watching it in a big chunk like you did yesterday, then
Yeah.
it's harder to do that. But
yeah, and like I was watching with Lindsay, and like she doesn't care as much about the behind the scenes stuff. So like we couldn't really do like the like watch an episode and then watch the making of, like it just wouldn't have like worked.
Sure.
So, but I'll watch all those.
Okay, but you like animated Thrawn?
I like animated Thrawn, mostly,
okay.
And we'll get to the other side of that later. I thought Kanan's death was good.
Mm-hmm.
I like it totally fit with his character. It totally fit with like the timeline and everything. Like it just, I mean, Kanan's entire arc, I guess, like it felt like a fitting end. And this is talking like going all the way back to the Kanan comic series, which we mentioned earlier, which I think is like a must read if you're a fan of Rebels. I think it's only like 12 issues. What was the book, the John Jackson Miller book, A New Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like everything from those all the way through his arc in Rebels, I thought was just fantastic. And I felt very satisfied with the way that that character met his end. Yeah, it was a heroic deed. It was like, and it was one of those, like, because sometimes, you know, a character dies doing something heroic and you're like, well, they could have just like not done that, and it would have been fine. It's like, no, this was like a literal do or die moment. Like he had to do what he did to keep his friends alive.
Right.
Like, and yeah, it totally fit with his character. Yeah, I loved it.
I agree. I think Kanan was a really great character throughout Rebels. You know, I have minor complaints about him, I guess, like mainly the whole, like, he was blinded by Darth Maul, but then they sort of just kind of acted like that didn't happen to a certain extent. I mean, he'd have the helmet on and his eyes look different, but like, you know, it was like for one episode where he's like, oh, I really have to like sort of, you know, deal with this and kind of like, you know, reach out with my senses more and stuff. And then after that, it was sort of like, I don't know, I feel like they didn't do much with that, which is whatever, but like not a big deal. But then also I too think like I thought his death was great. It was a perfect like fitting end to his character arc, all that stuff. I was a little worried they wouldn't do it because sometimes it seems like they're hesitant to do that. So you know, all that was great. I think it would have been kind of interesting, and I love the character, like I said, but I think it would have been kind of interesting if it had happened at like the end of season 3 or the beginning of season 4, so that you'd have more like post Kanan, like the rest of the crew, you know, dealing with that, and Ezra kind of like without a master, you know, that kind of stuff I think could have been good. But that's just sort of a what if, I guess. Like, and the way they did it was also good, and yeah, I think it worked out really well. But I am curious, like, what kind of stuff they could have explored if that had happened a little earlier in the season or in the show.
Yeah, so. I agree with that.
Okay.
I also think by the time we got to the end of the series finale, I wasn't feeling great about it. And then I think they did end with like a very strong epilogue. And I liked that the epilogue did like a time jump, and that like it focused on the Ghost crew and basically like the non-Jedi characters. Because for me, that was like the heart of the show. And you know, like there are these like very heavy-handed themes about family in the show, but like I the characters that interested me and the stories that interested me the most in Rebels were like the non-Jedi ghost crew, who, you know, who had their reasons for fighting back against the Empire. And I like that there was the focus just on that that group, and like they just kind of stopped with like the mystical stuff for a little bit. And
I mean, kind of, but like really the epilogue is like, okay, here's Sabine. Like I love the Sabine part of the epilogue, and I love the Zeb and Kalis part of the epilogue. But then it pretty quickly turns into like Hera has a son and he's probably Force sensitive, and then like, you know, the Gandalf of Star Wars is coming back so we can go into the outer regions and find the Jedi and the bad guy, you know, kind of thing. So it's like, I don't know, like to me it's really like it's not even that focused only on like, yeah. I don't know, you've watched it more recently than I have, so
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, I thought like the opening of like Sabine standing there on that tower, just like Ezra was in season 1, and sort of like reflectively looking back on Lothal, and it was focused on Lothal, you know. That's where okay, I'm getting agitated. I feel like that's where the show was at its strongest, is when it was about the ghost crew and about the planet of Lothal and about this smaller battle that they were fighting, the smaller war that they were fighting, instead of trying to turn it into like this larger epic thing. Not that I didn't like a lot of that stuff, but just overall, like it worked for me. The show worked for me the best when it was focused on the crew and on Lothal. And, but then like even the epilogue sort of like ended up being more like, it started out that way, and then it ended up being more about like the larger thing, you know. Like if they could have just left it like, we're reflecting on Lothal, we're reflecting on this crew. And I mean, I guess Ezra is like the essential key component of that crew, and he's out somewhere, so you got to go get him, you know. But I don't know. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you liked it. I didn't. I liked it too, but I don't know. It was to me, that epilogue is what Rebels is as a whole, which is like partially focused on stuff that is its strengths, and then partially focused on the stuff that kind of like not ruined the show for me, but like really kind of like brought the show down a couple notches for me, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. What's the name of the Imperial officer who joined them with the mutton chops?
Agent Callus.
Yeah. I like that, like his story was kind of resolved. Yeah. And like he was able to have like peace of mind knowing that like he hadn't committed like a total genocide.
No. Sabine and Zeb, I love. And Hera's fine too. Like,
I like Hera a lot.
Well, no, I'm not saying the character. I'm saying her component of the epilogue. No, I love Hera. I'm saying like the way that Hera was handled in that epilogue, like, hey, she's still flying for the rebellion, and she has a child with Kanan, is great. I just thought that kid was really goofy looking, and like, I don't know, like it was a little.
he was kind of weird looking.
Yeah, I didn't love that part of it, but yeah, you know, all that stuff.
I guess that answers like a lot of cross species procreation questions.
I guess, I don't know. Yeah,
it works. To quote L3.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess I just wasn't sure about the design of that character so much, but
you look like a kid's show character, like.
Yeah. That's true. Okay. Well, this is my fault because you just wanted to say that you like the epilogue, and I've turned it into this like 10-minute long debate here. But
I'm
it
just
was
talking
fun.
about like the way I felt yesterday. Like I was pretty deflated
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the show, and then the epilogue happened, and I was like, "Cool, okay,
Okay,
cool."
good.
Like, yeah,
Well, and like I said, like, and I guess you would agree with this, but a lot of the reaction to that epilogue was very, very positive from people. I think a lot of people are excited about like, I get to see more stories. Oh, potentially. I mean, they're not promising that, but like, the door is open for more stories with Ahsoka and Ezra and Thrawn and Sabine, and people like that idea. I don't really like that idea. Like, I mean, I will watch it and I bet they'll do a good job with it. But for me, I get to the end of a show like Rebels and I'm like, okay, the show is over. Like, you're going to make new animated series about new characters. Let's complete this story. Let's close the door on this story. And I just feel like it doesn't do that. I feel like, if anything, it's like, like, hey, will Ahsoka ever stop being featured in animated shows for Star Wars? Like, probably not, which I don't know. It's fine. And like, will I just feel like it just seems like with these Star Wars cartoons, like it's just having like a solid conclusion that really ends things is not in the cards, which I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's Star Wars in a way. Like, um, there's stuff. There's characters from 40 years ago that are coming back in the movies now.
Yeah, there are.
I mean,
All that stuff to me is linked to Star Wars animation, though.
yeah,
Like Darth Maul, they killed him in the movie.
yeah,
And that's how Star Wars movies used to be. Like, a bad guy died and he was really dead. Boba Fett died and he was really dead. Now I feel like lately it's like, oh well, we can always just change that. You know what I mean? And it seems to be a lot of times for something like this. A whole nother conversation that I have had many times, and like I'm constantly like sort of like just this is like a big thing for me. But I just think that like the Star Wars animated shows, the Star Wars movies, the Star Wars comics, the Star Wars books, it should all kind of be its own sort of like parallel universe to the other mediums. So like we feel like what happens in a Star Wars cartoon could be one version of the story. It's not going to straight up contradict the movies, but like they don't have to be, kind of telling. They don't have to be on the same. Like, the whole everything's canon deal to me is a little overblown. Like, I feel like, well, maybe Ahsoka's around and Ezra's around in the cartoons because that's like the cartoon universe and it tells the same story as the movie universe. But like, just because those two characters are part of the animated universe doesn't mean that they're gonna, be part of the film universe, or that like you have to watch the movies thinking that continuity is exactly the same as the movie continuity. But I think there's more people that really love the idea of it all being closely tied, and something like Darth Maul showing up in Solo is this amazing moment for them, and it's like, oh my god, the cartoons and the movies are all on the same level. They're all on the same level. It's all G level canon. It's like telling the same,
yeah.
To me, that makes it harder for me to enjoy the animated stuff if I have to like try to in my mind factor it in on that like intensive a level. So
Yeah, so I was at a Star Wars comics panel over the weekend at Denver Comic Con, and it was like Charles Soule and Jody Houser and Delilah S. Dawson, and when it got to like the fan Q&A part, like someone asked, like, inevitably at something like this, I was totally mentally prepared for like the conversation to take this turn, but someone asked about like the the old canon, the EU, the legends, and like how do you reconcile, like how do you think of that stuff? How do you think about like the comics versus the movies, like now in the Disney era and all that? And I really liked Delilah S. Dawson's comment on this. She was like, Star Wars is history. It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and history has, and I'm like totally paraphrasing here, but she was like, history, you know, there's like oral stories, there's you know, what's written from different perspectives. So like even in our own like human history, we don't totally know like the absolute truth about stuff. Like we don't know if like Alexander the Great did literally everything that, you know, is written about him, or, you know, there's different accounts of that and stuff. And she's like, that's what Star Wars is it's like, it's history, and there's not really like one single like true account of it. So there's these legends that are, you know, you can take with like your own grain of salt, and then there's like the you know, the modern stuff, which, you know, fits a little better, but it's still like, you know, imperfect because it's history from a really long time ago.
Yeah, no, that's like a perfect explanation of it. It makes so much sense. And I think based on like comments and stuff that the story group has made over the years, and just based on like the general vibe I get from Lucasfilm, I think that's what, I mean, obviously she's saying that because that's how it's viewed by the authors and like the creatives at Lucasfilm and stuff. But, and I totally understand why they did the whole, hey, everything's canon thing. You had to do that pre episode 7 to sort of say like, yeah, I know Luke Skywalker's married to Mara Jade, and that Han and Leia have like 3 kids, and Anakin turns bad. You know, I like all that stuff is out there, but we have to wipe it all away and say that from now on, if you get a Star Wars comic or you get a Star Wars book or whatever, it's not going to contradict the movies. Like we're knocking all the Dejarg pieces off the table and starting over here, and it's going to fit together better. So everything's canon. And I, you know, I think that made so much sense in that moment, and they've done that, you know, and they've done a good job with it. But I think to a lot of fans, it was interpreted as everything's equal now. Everything counts just as much as everything else. And, you know, depending on what you like in Star Wars, that's true. Like if you love Star Wars animation, that's your Star Wars, like the primary thing that you care the most about, then like what you see in animation, like that's what it is for you, you know? But I think, and if you love Star Wars movies, which is me, like my favorite thing in Star Wars are the Star Wars movies. Like to me, it has its own continuity, its own sort of like method of telling a story. And that's what I focus on the most. Now I enjoy all the other stuff too, but like, I just like to enjoy the films as like one version or one method of telling the story of the Star Wars universe. And then the animated stuff as a parallel method and version of that storytelling, and it's going to be mostly the same, but it's okay for there to be places where it diverges and where it's different. And to watch the movies, I sent you guys a screen cap of a tweet from the other day where somebody was like sort of saying like, well, no, we have to interpret this thing in the movie this way because this other thing happened in the animated cartoon. And so, you know, and actually it wasn't just we have to interpret it, the thing in the movie. The thing in the movie is not well done, and I'm criticizing the thing in the movie because it contradicts something sort of in a small way from a cartoon. To me, that's like a way to suck all the enjoyment out of watching a Star Wars movie, is to be like, well, I don't know, there's 400 hours of Star Wars cartoons and something from season 6 of whatever cartoon show contradicts this thing in this movie, so the director shouldn't have done that. They should have, you know, tied their hands behind their back and said, well, you know, 5 years ago on an episode of Star Wars animated show, this other thing happened. Like, I just don't think that's how Star Wars storytelling should be. And I don't think that is the perspective that they're doing it from, but I think that's the perspective that some fans have about everything. And it's like, to me, it's more fun if I can read a comic and something goofy happens and I'm like, oh, that would never work in a movie, but it's fine in a comic, you know? So the messaging is a little mixed, maybe from Lucasfilm. I think they're probably just thought like, yeah, people aren't going to take it that seriously. Like everything's totally 100% fits together.
People did, in fact,
people
take
did
it that seriously,
and they want that. And I'm not trying to say like you should, like, you know, I don't want to. People enjoy Star Wars in different ways, and like if you really want everything tightly integrated like that, and that's the way you think it should be, that's fine. That's not quite how I look at it, but I don't know. I just think we all need to relax a little bit about what's canon and what's not canon. And like, hey, in this Dave Filoni's Star Wars storytelling, X happens. Like maybe it happens a little differently in Rian Johnson's. Like that's okay, So.
Yeah, and one last thing, because God, somehow we've ended up having a 10-minute conversation about Canon, which is the worst.
That's my fault. Yeah, I do that.
Like I did just want to, something else that really struck me from the panel, it's related to this, like people enjoy Star Wars in different ways, and that's totally cool. Is Jodie Hauser was talking about how nervous she was about writing the Thrawn adaptation, because she she comes from like more of like a writer background, and so for her, like growing up, the Timothy Zahn Thrawn books were like, she said that she like connected with those like even more than the films, because she connected with books more than film. And just the medium. And I thought like that was super, super interesting, and kind of like goes to like your point, like people do like connect with different mediums, and like, some people like connect with like video games more, so that's where you get like that subsect of Star Wars fans that are like, I just want Knights of the Old Republic because I played that game when I was 15 and it like changed my life. I spent 200 hours in it, and but yeah, I think that's like fascinating.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like, okay, so like to try to bring it back to Rebels, to wrap up this conversation about what you didn't like about the ending of Rebels.
Sure.
Some of the stuff that you have listed here as your first negative is stuff that to me can be kind of fun and work in a cartoon, but could not work. I could not reconcile it with the film version of Star Wars. And for me, like this whole canon thing is like, everything's canon. Then it makes it way harder for me to enjoy some of this stuff that's in the ending of Rebels, because it's like, but that does not fit with what I know the rules and the sort of like the style of the movies to be. It's just too far out there from what Star Wars movies are. But I'm completely open to the idea and kind of cool with the idea of like, but it's not too far from what Star Wars animation is. It works kind of well in animation because it's a cartoon and it's a little bit, looser, and like you can have time travel and Jedi wolves in a cartoon, but like, let's not bring them into the movies. That to me, if we have that version of canon where it's like, you're not going to see something in season 4 of Rebels that completely contradicts, like, it's not like in season 4 of Rebels, Luke is married to Mara Jade, but in the movies he's not. That's too much. That's like, okay, this stuff doesn't work. You can't go that far. But like, time travel is a thing that we throw into Star Wars Rebels, the cartoon, but we're not going to throw it into movie, or, that kind of thing. Like if everybody was willing to be a little more loose with how this stuff fits together, I think the storytellers and the creatives within specific mediums would have more freedom, or maybe it looks like they're exercising that freedom anyway, but it would be a little easier to sort of accept those different things. Like comics are a different kind of storytelling than movies are. Cartoons are a different kind of storytelling than movies are. Novels and video games. There are going to be things in this video game we were talking about earlier, Jedi Fallen Knight or whatever. Like there are going to be things in there probably that Jedi are doing, and like, you're going to take how many blaster shots and not die. And if we have to be like so strictly like everything's canon, then like, well, hey, how come he could take those many blaster shots in this video game, but he can't do it in a movie? Because that's one of the things about video games. Like that's how you make a video game. You make a character jump higher than he would in a movie because it's a video game. You know what I mean? Like just like, let's be okay with the fact that certain mediums have different strengths and tell stories in different ways, in that that doesn't all have to be like on the same level in terms of everything comes back to the movies. And if it happened in a game, it has to be true for the movie or whatever. And maybe I'm the one with the problem because I'm the one who's worrying about this so much and kind of like thinking about it so much or whatever. But it's just like, I don't know. Like, I'm totally cool with every medium doing its own thing, and we're just not going to contradict, and it's going to be more fluid and make more sense together, but it doesn't have to be, which I guess is exactly what like Delilah S. Dawson was saying, right? Like, you have different stories, different histories, different ways of interpreting this stuff. So from that perspective, Ryan, I like some of the crazy stuff at the end of season 4 of Rebels. If it only exists in that continuity, you know?
Yeah.
What did you not like there at the end?
I didn't like the time travel and the Jedi wolves and the dimension between dimensions. Yeah, that stuff. And I think you have a point though. Like, when it comes with the baggage of like, yep, it's all canon and it's all equal. Like, wow. So does that mean that in episode 9 that Rey can go to this dimension between dimensions, go look in through this portal, see Han Solo on the bridge with Ben Solo, and then reach in there and just grab Han Solo and pull him out, and then he doesn't die? Like,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think yeah, like that was just like, whoa, we're really off the rails here. Like, but then I think if you do think of it in just like the context of you know, the show, like, it doesn't feel that off,
right?
But as part of like the bigger picture, like, man, that's weird, because like time, like dimensional stuff and time travel, like that's not really Star Wars to me. Like, because that just like opens up so much that I mean, that's like try jumping in and understanding like an X-Men comic right now where like Wolverine is like this super old dude. Like, just grab an issue off the stands and see, and like you just, if you're like haven't been reading for years, you're like, why is Wolverine old and everyone else is the same age? And wait, why are like the X-Men from the 60s here as well? And there's like 2 Jean Greys and like what? Because, and like, God, like, I love superhero comics, I love the X-Men, but like, we do not want Star Wars to go down this road. Like, it's a very bad place.
Yeah, but it's also the kind of storytelling you expect in a comic, but you'd never expect that same sort of thing really in like the X-Men movies, right? Like, they're going to do it in a movie way, like in a way that makes sense for a movie, like a 2-hour movie.
Well, you kind of got it in like the Days of Future Past X-Men movie, and which was like not super well regarded by people. So it's because it's a lot. But
yeah. Well, yeah. and that's maybe not the best example either, because like X-Men is primarily a comic, you know what I mean? And so the movie is something that stems off of that. Whereas like Star Wars, I believe, is primarily a movie series, and like the cartoons and the books and the comics stem off of the movies. And so like, that's the kind of story it is first and foremost, versus like X-Men, which really the movie is a small part of the puzzle. The larger thing is the comic. Like, that's what it really is. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I like I like Dave Filoni and the Star Wars animation people having the freedom to have the Emperor shoot blue fire out of his hands that can grab people and pull them places. Let him do that, because that works in the cartoon. But, you know, don't sort of argue that then watching the movie next time you'll say, well, how come the Emperor didn't use his blue magnetic fire to pull somebody into a thing? Like, because that's not part of the movie version of the storytelling. It's just a different medium, you know? I also think that interdimensional gateway thing is just sort of, people love it. I'm happy they like it. It's whatever. To me, it's just like, well, we've got all these threads we need to tie up, and what's like a super convenient way to do that. Let's create this interdimensional gateway thing, and then we can just boop boop boop. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's what it is. When I watch it, it doesn't seem like it stems from a place of this is what the story truly is. It seems like it stems from a place of, okay, we've got 3 episodes to finish up this whole thing, and what did happen to Ahsoka in that Vader temple thing? Like, boom boom boom, let's do this like dimension thing. You know. The counter argument to that, though, is you see Ezra talking to Yoda in season 1, and he's floating around in that interdimensional gateway thing, I guess. So, you know, like, maybe that was the plan all along, I guess. It seems like it was, but it feels really convenient anyway.
Feels weird. It felt weird watching it. And yeah. I mean, I am like very happy that Ahsoka lived. And, you know, I think I could have gone either way. Like, I think Vader killing Ahsoka would have been poetic and would have worked really well. On the other hand, I really love the character of Ahsoka, and would like to continue to see her in stuff in like, you know, get more stories around her. But I'd also be fine with, you know, I think I would have been fine if, you know, Vader had killed her. That felt like a logical conclusion to her story and part of Vader's story, and Anakin's story. And then we could have gotten like other stories about like her adventures before she died, like that excellent book that came out about a year ago. Yeah, like that book was so good. I love that book. And like I would love more just like little stories like that. I don't know how I feel about, like, as much as I love the character, like it is kind of weird when we're about to like roll into like Resistance as the next animated show, if like at the end of season 1 or something, Ahsoka and Ezra show up in that. Like, that's gonna I know some people are going to lose their minds and be so excited. It's gonna feel real weird to me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna love that. You know, it's something that has been coming up with characters like Darth Maul and stuff lately. But to me, like, loving a character and wanting that character to like stick around forever, that doesn't have to be the outcome of really loving a character to me personally. You know, like, I think certain characters that are in Star Wars movies and storytelling for brief periods of time, but are really good, and really great characters. Like Darth Maul was wasted in The Phantom Menace is the example I'm thinking of. That drives me crazy. I don't think a character is wasted because their story is ended. Like, Ahsoka's a great character. I also really like the character of Ahsoka. I don't think that if they had cut her story off at its most logical conclusion in her confrontation with her former master, that would be like wasting the character. Or, well, I love her, so I want her story to continue. I love her, so I want her story to be the best it can be. And I think ending in that moment would make it the best story it can be. But like, people seem to think like Darth Maul's a really cool villain. That means we should just have him always around. Like, that doesn't honor a character to me. To me, like, you know, how does that character best fit in whatever story is being told? Like, Darth Maul did not need to be a part of the prequel trilogy after The Phantom Menace. It didn't make sense for the story of Anakin and the Emperor for Darth Maul to be around. It actually would have lessened that story to me. So the best way to use that character is the way he was used in the prequels. But people who are like, he looks badass, he hops around with a double-sided lightsaber, and he's a cool fighter and a cool presence in the movie, that means he should just last forever. That logic to me is like, so it's just wish fulfillment logic versus like storytelling logic. You know, how do you tell a story versus like, I don't know, I like them, so let's just keep them around forever? Like, that's just not good storytelling, I think, you know.
And, you know,
I know you get that, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and there's other ways to do that. Like, you can have a character die. Like, we had Han Solo die in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Then we had the movie Solo, which is awesome. Like, you can, and it adds to like his character arc. You can do stuff like that. But like, I agree, like, just let characters go, like, end at their logical ending spot.
Yeah, and I mean, like they did it recently too with Darth Maul. I mean, I'm not as high on that example, but like they killed him off in Rebels, and then they brought him back in Solo. So,
Yep.
like, you know, God, imagine if they would have been like, well, we just really like Maul, so let's not even kill him off in Rebel season 4. We might want to bring him back in Resistance. Like, just don't ever kill anybody because.
Yeah.
And then I've heard the counter argument too. Like, I think Sky Talkers, which is a podcast we both love. Hopefully, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but I think that they sometimes lament the fact that a lot of Star Wars fans are kind of bloodthirsty when it comes to killing off characters, and like, you know, like characters don't always have to get killed; they don't always have to die, you know. And I think that's a valid point too, for sure. So
yeah,
I don't know, but I think and I'm not even a storyteller or like a writer or anything, you know, but like for me, I think my perspective is always just kind of like, for the story that's being told, what makes the most sense. And if you have to make a hard choice, like that is, to me, that's the best way to honor a character, is to use them in a way that really helps tell that story, because then, you know, their purpose is fulfilled versus kind of just, I like the character, so let's find a way to keep them alive, which I think, I mean, sorry, but I think that kind of seems to be the Dave Filoni school of thought is, you know, I really like Ezra, so let's make sure he doesn't die at the end of this series. And Ezra's a different example too, though, because like he is the character that is there for kids to identify with, and he's sort of the hero of the story for the kids. And so I'm in support of that. And maybe you can make the same argument with Ahsoka too, because she was that character in Clone Wars. So if you're kind of sparing, you know, that for the young audiences and sort of saying like, let's not kill off their hero, like, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,
you know,
I'll take that. Yeah,
I'll take that too. Especially if we're willing to say this is Star Wars animation and Star Wars movies over here on this parallel timeline are a little different. Then, you know, fine, let's do that. So, yeah, I don't know.
One last thing. Speaking of things that make me feel weird in Rebels, but it's helped by, you know, it's really been therapeutic to kind of like talk this out, so I don't have like these lingering weird feelings. But yeah, like it is kind of weird to me that, you know, where Rebels ends is, I don't know, like X number of years, possibly months before A New Hope. And especially when you like factor in the epilogue and stuff, I don't know exactly where it would fall on the made up timeline, but it is kind of weird thinking about rolling into A New Hope and the original trilogy, where Luke and, you know, Obi-Wan and Yoda, and to a lesser extent Leia, are considered like, and obviously Anakin, are considered like the only like Force users left, or Jedi or whatever. But like rolling into that with also somewhere else Ezra and Ahsoka are around. Like,
yeah, that's a weird feeling.
Yeah,
that's why, to me, like in my personal like kind of way of viewing things, like to me, that's the truth in the animation version of Star Wars storytelling, but it's not the truth in the film version. I know like most people are going to really disagree with me or like not be into my like kind of feeling on this, but in my mind, Ahsoka only exists in animation. Like when I watch Return or Revenge of the Sith, I have never once thought like, oh yeah, Anakin just got done training his Padawan Ahsoka and she quit the Jedi Order, and like all that stuff happened between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. It didn't be, number one, those movies were made before those stories were even told, and so like it's just, it doesn't, I don't know. I just don't think of it that way, and I know that people will find that really disrespectful and be like, I'm not giving Ahsoka the credit she deserves, or I'm like sort of undermining that character. It's not like what it's about for me. I just to me, like these different these different mediums of storytelling exist like kind of separately, and I really enjoy Ahsoka. I really enjoy her story. I really enjoy watching her in Clone Wars and Rebels. I think you know, she's great. I even like her in season 1 of Clone Wars, where a lot of people don't like her because she's like more childish and stuff. Like, I think that's great. I like characters like that. I'm fine with it. I just, in my mind, it's like those animated stories are a completely different medium and a different version of the storytelling. They always have been. That's really clear when you try to reconcile certain like plot elements and stuff. And rather than getting worked up about how things don't fit together perfectly, I just kind of look at it like, first they made some Star Wars movies, you know, the prequels. Then they made some Star Wars cartoons. They mostly tell the same story, but in certain ways they're different. And one of those ways they're different is that in those movies, Anakin did not have a Padawan. There's no mention of Ahsoka ever because she hadn't even existed in George Lucas's mind when they made the prequels. Like, he didn't have a Padawan then. And then they made a cartoon about a version of the story where he did have a Padawan. And I can enjoy both of those things and not have to try to find a way to slam them together so that they fit in a way that I don't think they really do, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to watch the sequel trilogy and the original trilogy the same way. I'm not going to be watching it thinking like, well, Luke is the last hope for the Jedi, except for actually Ezra is out there in the unknown regions with Ahsoka. And if Luke gets killed or something, like they'll just send a Obi-Wan out to the, you know, or whatever. Like, I'm not going to watch it like that. Like, it's not the story in my head. And I really don't even think it's the story in like Dave Filoni's head or Pablo Hidalgo's head or Kathleen Kennedy's head or whatever. I don't really think it is. Maybe George Lucas's head, but see our previous conversation about microbiotic sequel trilogy. Like, who knows what he thinks, you know? It's different whatever day you ask him. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's room for parallel versions of these stories, and I enjoy them more when I think about them that way. So
yeah, and I mean, I feel like I don't want to like totally discount like the other mediums, because like, and it's hard because like it really does come down to like headcanon and some selective judgment. Because when I think of, you know, there's a lot of you know, books and comics and even the animated shows that do like actually change and enhance my viewings of the films. Like when I think of like a book like Catalyst and how I read that between my first and second viewings of Rogue One in the theater, like, and how it changed and enhanced my viewing of that movie. And like, and then like most recently, Most Wanted, like really made me appreciate like Kira's story arc so much more in the film, and it like made it so much better. And like, you know, and I think that is just like, that's being selective, and it's I don't know, maybe it's not like the like total truth or whatever, but like I don't know. I guess it is headcanon. It really comes down to.
It is. And you made the statement there that you don't want to discount the other mediums. And I agree with that. In I hope I've been clear about this, but like for me, separating them out a little bit is not a way of discounting them. It's a way of almost giving them more freedom and in allowing them to play to the strengths that they have individually. Like books have certain strengths, comics have certain strengths, games have certain. I want them all to be able to do that without the fear of, but does it line up with the way the movie tells a story, or does it line up with the way a video game tells a story, you know? And like, as far as the whole, like, you know, a book or a comic or a cartoon can enrich the films, it is selective, I guess, because you're right. Like I want Star Wars animation to be kind of a parallel thing, but that doesn't mean I feel like watching 6 seasons of the Clone Wars doesn't enrich the prequel trilogy, because you get so much. It does, you know, but it's just like, I guess I just have a feeling where I want them to be loosely connected, not like completely tightly connected, you know? And so certain things like Ahsoka being Anakin's Padawan, to me, I just don't see in the prequels where that works or lines up or makes sense. But that doesn't mean like watching that cartoon and lots of other things about it don't kind of factor into my understanding of the story. But so it is selective, but it's also just kind of like I'm looking for the commonalities and the way they make sense together, not looking for where do they not meet and how can I criticize or like try to like point out flaws in that, you know. Because I think no matter what, they're not always going to line up perfectly. So it's just like enjoy the parts that do line up, and like, you know, the character of Kira in the book, it shouldn't contradict the character of Kira in the movie. It should enrich, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, we shouldn't have to hold the movie to every little thing that happens in the book or vice versa, you know, like just let them be their own stories and they'll enrich each other, but we'll understand that they're kind of separate versions of events, you know? Yeah. So I don't know, but.
So my big takeaways from this conversation here is one, the medium is the message.
Okay. All right. Marshall McLuhan, look at you. All right. Very good.
Yeah. And also Star Wars is history. It's real.
Yes.
And it is history, unfortunately, told by unreliable narrators.
Yeah. And
I think like now I'm at peace with everything.
Good. Yeah, I think that's a good kind of ultimate way to look at Star Wars too, because Star Wars Rebels, like season 1, I love it so much. Seasons 3 and 4 and parts of season 2, I like, but there's stuff that just does not work for me in those seasons. If I was the kind of fan that, like, I don't know, gets really angry about certain things, I feel like I would walk away from Rebels and be like, nope, that show sucked. Never mind. I don't like that show. Instead, I walk away from Rebels saying, like, I really love season 1, and I'll probably go back and watch season 1 5 more times throughout my life, you know, and I probably won't go back and watch those other seasons, maybe I'll watch them again at some point, but like, I'm not going to go watch them over and over. It's fine. I'll appreciate the stuff that I like from Rebels, and I'm not going to get all angry about the stuff I didn't, you know, like there is a version of me, speaking of parallel universes, where I could have like blown up about the world between worlds and like let it ruin everything. Same thing with Darth Maul and Solo. Like, if I wanted to, I could focus on that. It could ruin my experience, and I could decide that unless a movie is perfect or unless a cartoon is perfect and it does exactly what I want all the time, it's no good and it sucks, you know? And I have friends that do that with Star Wars and with other things too. And it's like, and I'm sure I'm guilty of doing it with games or, you know, other books or I don't know, whatever. But like with Star Wars, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job lately of just saying, like, here's the stuff I like, here's the stuff I don't like, here's what works for me, here's what doesn't work for me. And I don't have to get all worked up about like everything not fitting perfectly or whatever. Like, I'll just, you know, enjoy the stuff I like. And I want it all to gel as a larger story. And I think it does for the most part, but there's going to be times where it doesn't all fit together and it doesn't work perfectly. Or there's going to be times where I like certain shows or seasons, especially with like the Disney streaming service coming up and all of the, like, we're going to have like probably 3 or 4 Star Wars TV shows going on at once, you know, like we're going to have to get used to like some stuff will work for us, some stuff won't. And when there's hundreds and thousands of hours of Star Wars television programming and hundreds of issues of comics and hundreds of novels, and you're just going to have to be, I feel like for our own sanity, we're going to have to be willing to say like, some of this stuff factors into how I view Star Wars and how I enjoy Star Wars. And some of it I'm going to leave to the side or just kind of, you know, it can't all like, man, we can't be fundamentalists when it comes to Star Wars and still enjoy it. I think, you know, we've got to be willing to sort of say like some stuff I'm just going to let it slide. And I'm not worry about it so much, you know? So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think this conversation turned into something we didn't expect it to.
No.
It's probably my fault, but hopefully it was okay. Sorry, Ryan. I feel like you wanted the opportunity to come in here and talk about the ending of Star Wars Rebels, and I sort of like commandeered it and turned it into this argument about canon. Which
I think like that was kind of, I mean, part of like fundamentally like some of my issues and hangups with it was trying to reconcile it with the films, which are like, you know, my point of contact with Star Wars, but also trying to, you know, really understand and empathize with people who, you know, like connect more with the medium of comics or the books or the animation, and like understand that that's like also extremely valid, and you know, just in like a different place than like you and I are at with it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
All right,
it's cool.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of teased it earlier, but hopefully later this week we'll be back with an episode that's more about celebrating what we love instead of fighting what we hate. I don't know.
It's a good tease.
That's a good tease, right? I mean, I sort of ad-libbed that or I changed it up a little, but
hey,
paraphrase.
Who knows what the actual quote was?
Different history.
Yep.
Exactly.
It's like the let them eat cake. Did Marie Antoinette actually say that?
I don't know. But I do love the Marie Antoinette movie filtered through punk rock, just like I love young Han Solo and Kira filtered through punk rock too, which I've been reading about in The Art of Solo, and it's such a cool thing. Anyway, this has been the Blockade Runner Podcast update on recent news and our discussion, supposedly, of Star Wars Rebels, which was really just about canon and stuff.
Yay!
Hopefully, we'll be back later this week with some more episodes of the Blockade Runner, or another episode of the Blockade Runner Podcast. You can find previous episodes, and Ryan, you did a great blog post about signed comic books earlier this week. Previous videos and stuff, blockaderunnerpodcast.com. Please email us, let us know what you think. blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com, and follow our podcast account on Twitter @blockaderun. Ryan, on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter @BrawnDwarf, BrawnDwarf.
All right, so thanks so much for watching or listening, and we will be back soon.